Dobrý den, pojďme řešit zákazníka, to je něco, s čím bych se vždycky určitě shodnul. Já přepnu do angličtiny, protože ten panel bude v angličtině, so please join me, gentlemen. And we should have two more online. So, thank you very much for being with us at the time when brunch time moves to lunch time. We will have no food here, but we will have definitely food photos here. My name is Aleš Rod. I am the Executive Director at the Center for Economic Market Analysis, member of National Economic Council, and accidentally a host of this panel. This panel will be very interesting because it has 4 panelists of 3 nationalities. 2 of them are online. Yeah, so it will be a challenge, but this challenge will be definitely based on the topics we will discuss. I will briefly introduce the topics and then I will introduce our esteemed panelists. We will talk about 5 points, I would say. The first one is that the soon-to-be concluded European Commission term brought many regulatory challenges aimed to strengthen competition and compliance among European companies in the digital and e-commerce spaces. These regulatory measures also wants to protect smaller companies, and the question is if it succeeds, if it should be followed or maybe changed in the next European Commission term. So that's the first point. Second point is dealing with Digital Market Act, Digital Service Act, AI Act, Digital Act. Those are just examples of many digital regulations aiming to adjust the conditions of business environment in the EU, where technology and progress has been ahead of regulation. And the question is if it has to be the right way forward, or how will or should the implementation look like in this area. The third topic I'm very interested in is that one of the key themes resonating recently in the EU, and we heard it in previous panels also, is Europe competitiveness vis-a-vis other regions, United States, China, or more broadly, Asia. And the question is if the above mentioned and similar regulation helping or hampering such competitiveness, if the Europe even need own national champions in digitalization or producing digital services and providing digital services, and also if it's even possible to raise those champions in the market which is not single, where the regulation is not harmonized, and where is a language fragmentation, which is also a barrier. And last but not least, we will touch also the investment environment in the European Union and its influence on the capacity of EU-based supply of digital technologies. And this topic, I'm an economist, and this topic is very important for me and for clients we cooperate in CETA, because the competitiveness and approach to best technologies is the driving factor of Czech economic growth, innovations, and competitiveness of our factories and entrepreneurs. So those were topics. And now let me introduce our esteemed panelist, who has both charisma and expertise to talk about those topics. So first, online, Martin Bednář. Martin is currently the head of section for single market, industry, energy, and digital at the Czech Parliament representation in Brussels, which is basically the extended hand of the Czech government working with the EU institutions. Previously, Martin worked as a director of the EU and Single Market Department and also head of EU law unit at the Czech Ministry of Industry and Trade. Welcome, Martin. The second one, also online, Michal Kardoš. Michal is Executive Director of SAPIA, Slovenská alianza pre inovatívnu ekonomiku, which represents Slovak technological and startup scene and is a partner to the stakeholders who create policies that affect innovation and digital entrepreneurship. They are the leading platform for policy debate on digital topics in Slovakia, but also working to influence major policy changes on the national EU level. Michal, welcome.
Good afternoon.
And finally, offline, here with us, Ondřej Malý, expert on digital and telco, currently works as a consultant. His previous roles as Deputy Minister of Industry and Trade, responsible for digital agenda, or member of the Council of the Czech Telecommunications Office, equip him with all the insights we will hear today. Welcome, Ondřej. And last but not least, James Waterford, the director of the EU policy team at Amazon, where he is responsible for the company's interaction with the European Union institutions across a wide range of issues. James has been active in policy and government affairs for more than 20 years in London and Brussels, initially in the telecoms sector for cable and wireless, Telefonica and Nokia, before running a trade association for internet companies and then joining Amazon. Welcome, James. Well, that was much reading, much word, so let's start with our panelists, and let's start with Martin Bednář. Martin, are you with us?
Yeah. Yes, I'm with us. Thank you for the invitation and looking forward to the question.
Perfect. So, Martin, you were working as the Ministry of Industry and Trade when DSA and DMA were introduced. How do you assess and maybe even grade, as if we're in school, how these regulations and other pieces of digital legislation succeeded in meeting the initial goals?
Thank you for the question. It's a complex one. Well, I think we should start with saying that basically the current institutional term that is now ending was basically really prominent with regard to digital sector and with regard to priorities, with regard to digitalization. The Commission started this term with digital domain as one of its biggest priorities. This was widely supported by majority of member states. So basically in this term, we've had very many pieces of digital legislation. It was the Digital Markets Act that you mentioned, Digital Services Act. We also had Digital Governance Act, Data Act. And now we are about to, or we actually adopted already the AI Act. So it's a number of acts, and the question about their success is rather difficult one, because if you look at basically the dates of applicability of these acts, basically most of them only just started. So if we look at Digital Services Act, DSA, that you asked, basically it only became applicable on 17th of February 2024. So nearly already 3 months. And that's the same question with many other pieces of digital legislation like Data Act, Digital Governance Act. So it's rather soon, actually, to be able to evaluate whether this legislation served its purpose and whether it fulfills its goals. The Digital Markets Act that you also asked about is rather a unique example where we actually can look at how successful it was, because this is the one that is applicable already a year from May last year. So we saw that the Commission started diligently implementing this and enforcing this piece of legislation. Basically, it already basically picked the gatekeepers. Those are the big platforms or tech enterprises that control their market, and that basically are basically belong to the competence and belong to the obligations that the DMA brought about. So the Commission already established 6 gatekeepers that are obliged to respect the DMA. These gatekeepers are Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, ByteDance, Meta, and Microsoft. And already at the end of March, the Commission already started proceedings and investigations that are directed towards finding out whether these it was the investigation against 4 of those gatekeepers, namely Apple, Alphabet, Meta, and Amazon, whether they actually are compliant with DMA. So if I would pick one piece of legislation that is actually on track to delivering its objective, which is fair and functioning digital markets, that would be DMA.
Mm-hmm. I recently spoke about competitiveness of Europe. So how do you think the digital legislation impacts the EU's competitiveness?
It's a complex debate that will be at forefront already now and also for the next Commission, because it's a fact that the EU competitiveness is not growing quick enough and dynamic enough if you compare it to the US or China. So it's an issue that we need to find answers to. If you look at basically what digital legislation does to competitiveness, I would be to some degree positive, because it's true that basically if you don't legislate and if you don't create the market for digital at the EU level, what you face afterwards is diverging legislation from different member states that actually fragments the market and doesn't allow businesses to grow and to scale up. So I think in the EU, we actually need a legislation that creates a level playing field and same conditions across the whole of the single market. And I think lots of the pieces of digital legislation that were introduced built on this principle, and also built on the principle of country of origin, that actually really allows member states to fulfill and businesses to fulfill the obligations in the home country, and then to export and function at the whole of the single market. So with that, it's definitely a pro-competitive move. To be maybe a little critical is that it is also a lot criticized that if you look at the US, where you have most of the tech champions, they do not face that many obligations by the American legislation. They do not have to fulfill that many reporting requirements. So there, on this part, there's definitely room to fill at the EU level.
Yeah, there is a joke saying that the only problem about single market is that it's not single and it's not market. Yeah. So, and I know that you, in your current role, operation of the digital single market is your key agenda. So, I'm curious about its present and future, and I ask you, similarly as other panelists, imagine that you are talking to the new Commission. What would be your main recommendation regarding single market?
Well, the recommendations and objectives are quite straightforward. So it's to integrate the single market to achieve really that we have harmonized rules for all businesses from all member states. then to focus rather than on introducing new rules on implementation. So we really need to implement the vast number of very many digital files that we introduced in this term. And lastly, we need to cut the administrative burden. We need to cut the red tape, create breathing space for businesses. And in doing so, we need to enable more scale up and creation of European champions. But it is important. I'm coming from the Czech Republic. I'm representing here the permanent representation to the EU. These conditions for scale up and for growth of champions, they also need to make sure that actually the smaller member states and small and medium-sized enterprises from these member states are actually not worse off. So basically, the single market needs to create conditions for the whole of the value chain to actually be better off and be on the productivity growth.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Martin. Please stay with us. But let's move to James. Amazon has been designated as a gatekeeper under DMA, and we have listened that you has been designated as a very large online platform under the DSA. How do you how would you comment overall on the legislative process adopting of these two files? And probably as a particular interest to the audience here, I understand that you decided to challenge the designation as a very large online platform under DSA. So can you shed some light also to this and why, and explain us why?
Sure, and thanks to everybody else who's been willing to allow the fact that I'm changing the language of the conference. I realize everything else has not been in Czech, so thank you for bearing with me as an audience, as a moderator. I would ask the question about the legislative process and the goals that authorities have set themselves about competition and keeping the internet clean. I would ask yourselves in the room or watching online to put yourself in the shoes as you as a purchaser, or if you have an e-commerce business, to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's running business and trying to attract customers. And in the end, what I think successful regulation looks like is partly what Martin was saying, that it enables one, hopefully simple rule book across all of the European Union that makes the EU attractive to domestic or international investors. But are we achieving the goals that we want for our customers? So those goals are two things. One, keeping them safe online. Are you safe online? And two, that there is an open and competitive environment online. That's broadly what the pieces of legislation are doing. And I don't need a show of hands here, I would ask you all to think in your habits. It would probably be the stupidest question ever to ask people at an e-commerce conference whether they shop online. So I'm assuming everybody at an e-commerce conference shops online. And I don't know which shops you shop from, but I know there's a number of very successful Czech e-commerce businesses. And I know that Amazon, the company I work for, is about 1% of retailing. I'm not talking about the Czech Republic, I'm talking about across Europe, across the world. So there's a reasonable chance that when you here are buying, you're not buying from Amazon. I hope you do buy from Amazon, but there's a reasonable chance that you're not. And maybe we can change that habit over the years. So going back to the regulation seeks to keep people safe online, keep them protected from some kind of harmful product or harmful content. But I'm guessing it's probably not applying to your purchase, because you're probably not purchasing on Amazon. So did the European authorities protect you? Did they protect your customers? Well, if we're 1% of retailing, that means we're not 99% of retailing. Which means in most situations, that piece of legislation is not protecting you, and it's not protecting 99% of customers. So the intention is very sensible. Let's protect people online from whatever situations they may be thinking about. The execution, I think we need to keep still working on. That's the first message I would have. And the same goes, I think, for competition. So keeping the EU open, again, we're 1% of retailing. That means most retailing is not us. So if there are particular problems, have they been dealt with by what the new EU regulation sets forward? Well, in the majority of cases, no, because 99% of transactions are simply uncovered by those. So I think the lessons to be learned for future policy making to stimulate e-commerce, stimulate adoption of modern tools, to give consumers a good experience, is we need to make sure that we are legislating for actual problems, not perceived problems, and we need to make sure that we are not discriminating. Customers don't care where they are shopping. They're going to shop in many different places, and we need the rules to be simple for customers as well as simple for businesses. So try not to discriminate in your policy making and just go after certain small parts of the activity, go after where the customers are, and they're in many different places. They're online, they're offline, they're in domestic shops, they're in international shops. So make sure you're uniform in dealing with whatever problem you've identified. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind for the future. And that actually helps me to explain our thinking around your second question, which is for those who are fans of legal process, Amazon has challenged its designation as a very large online platform under the Digital Services Act. And the reason we've done this is that the Digital Service Act applies to many different types of businesses. Social media businesses, app store businesses, e-commerce businesses, search engines. They're completely different from each other. The way they work, what you need to be protected from. Our view is if you want to regulate retailing and protect people from things like an unsafe product, then regulate retailing. Regulate product safety. Don't create a combination of rules which are partly about undesirable content on social media, partly about the way people find information on search engines, partly about app stores, and partly about some e-commerce marketplaces. I'm not convinced that that does the job. So that's why we have challenged the the designation of Amazon as a very large online platform, because it will require us to do certain things that we think don't protect customers at all. Customers get no benefit, for example, from an advertising database, which is one of the things that we're required to do. So we can see why you might do that for other services. We don't think it makes sense, so we don't think it's a good idea here, and we want to make sure that everyone understands why that's a poor idea. Think about customers first, and if you're a politician, think about the end consumer first. They're the ones you're looking after.
I was about to ask you the similar questions, like to Martin, about your recommendation or possible recommendations to the next Commission, and what priorities should the Commission consider for the EU to be competitive on the global market. You partially answered it in the first part of your answer. So please, could you pick up like three best or three most important recommendations for the future Commissions?
Sure. And I even have it in brochure form. I have it in English and in Czech. So only if I'm going to speak it out in English, we can give you this in Czech. So I'm now thinking not just about a website, but I'm thinking about everything from logistics. So when you order a product, it comes to your house. It comes in a lorry. There are people who have to pick it up and put it in a box. So we have quite a broad range of ideas. But it comes down to three key ideas, which is we think that Czech authorities, the EU authorities together need to create a sustainable single market that will make the EU strong businesses, resilient in the face of shocks, will make the EU prosperous. We need a highly competitive economy that helps individuals deal with inflation, with their household budgets, helps businesses to invest, governments to invest, and makes the EU green. We need to do all three together. We can't do one of those, or the second of those, or the third. We have to do all three together. So that's a challenging agenda, but one that we believe very much can be done, and we are investing against. So some of the specifics. Cross-border activity. We are very invested in cross-border activity. Many of the more than 4,000 employees we have in the Czech Republic are undertaking activities which will be for the benefit of non-Czechs. So we have considerable investments here which are serving the Italian customers or Austrian customers or German customers or Polish customers, wherever they are. Cross-border commerce needs to work. Cross-border recycling needs to work. If we're able to create a real circular economy, make sure we're responsible in the impact we're having on our planet, it's not good enough to simply say, I'll have a recycling system in one country. You need a recycling system that works between Germany and the Czech Republic, between Germany and France, between Spain and Italy. It's no longer good enough to say, I'll just set it up for one country. We need a VAT system that works between countries. We need a logistics system. So we are investing around €1 billion over the next 5 years in electric transport, heavy goods vehicles, the kind of trucks you see going on the motorway, as well as the small vans that go around town. Electric trucks don't work unless there's electric charging. Unless there's renewable energy for the electric charging, then there's less point in the electric charging. It only works, the business case for this only works if it's done at the scale of the European Union. There is no business case for electric trucking at the scale of Germany or the Czech Republic or Italy. It needs to be done at the scale of the European Union if you're to have a green European Union and a competitive one. A competitive one, why? Because over time, the costs will come down. We work with companies like Daimler, Scania, who produce these trucks. The trucks are expensive now, even if the total cost of owning it over 10 years is competitive. Over the next 10 years, it will come down very quickly if we do this at the scale of the single market. If we don't, we will be left behind other jurisdictions. I could go on, but those are some of the examples of what we hope governments will do together over the next 10 years.
Thank you. And thank you for the great sec to Michal. Michal, are you with us?
Yes, good afternoon.
Okay, so please let me start a question with a story. Yeah. The story is about vacuum cleaning. Because we know that Amazon, together with the company iRobot, producer of the smart vacuum cleaners called Roomba, announced recently that they will not go ahead with the planned Amazon's acquisition of iRobot, as the European Commission would have prohibited this merger. Why? Due to concerns about Amazon's alleged ability and incentive to delist competing vacuum cleaners or otherwise favors iRobot to degrade competitors. The prohibition of the transaction conveys a clear message to tech startups, which already gravitated away from Europe, that's important, that the prospect of being acquired by a large tech company has become a questionable and risky exit strategy in Europe. This is evidenced also by iRobot's financial demise that a lengthy and futile regulatory review only aggravated. So, Michal, are your members concerned about this trend the Commission has set recently? Me personally, I am deeply concerned about the investment environment in the European Union. So my question on you and probably your members, is that the same?
Thank you very much for the question. Once again, good afternoon. Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's somehow connected with the current environment of startups and scale-ups, and as well as unicorns in the European Union. Well, we have been experiencing, or the EU has been struggling with the outflow of some interesting and really innovative startups and scale-ups from the European Union, and their main destinations were locations like the United States or Israel in the past. We have also experienced a decline in funding or investments into startups in 2023 in comparison to 2022. In 2023, it was only $52 billion, and in 2022, it was $86 billion. So So what we are experiencing is a decline in investments, is outflow of startups and scale-ups to other locations. And I'm afraid this decision can be one of the, let's say, reasons, or the startups and scale-ups or even unicorns can have an extra motivation why to relocate to some other countries or to some other destinations. We are SAPI, or the Slovak Alliance for Innovation Economy, together with some other 40 organizations, is gathered under the umbrella of the umbrella organization called Allied for Startups. And what we think about the competition when it comes to startups, we have like three main recommendations, and that is the strengthen a fast-growing, diverse platform economy where startups can thrive. The second is to enable mergers and acquisitions to fuel competition in the startup ecosystem. And the third one would be that the startups need understandable, efficient competition policy. And this is definitely something that we should, as the European Union, work on in order to seize the outflow of startups and innovative companies from the territory of the European Union. So I think this would be my comment on that.
Mm-hmm. Looking ahead, I know that you and your members were working through several channels on different ways how to tackle or how to improve the EU environment for startups. And I would say the situation in Slovakia is very similar to the situation in Czech Republic. So could you share your main thoughts on that? Some main recommendations, because I asked the questions about recommendations for the future commission. So maybe could you answer the question in that way?
Yes, actually, part of our work is or what we do a lot is we invest our energy into policy making and advocating for a better policy environment for startups and scale-ups in the EU. And we have had a lot of activities towards European Parliament, European Commission. For example, together with the former EU Commissioner Maria Gabriel, we prepared a joint statement, a common document on how to boost startup ecosystem in the European Union, which was focusing mainly on talent and supporting or boosting the startup ecosystem in the European Union. But our quite recent recommendations that we prepared under the umbrella of Allied for Startups focuses on several areas. For example, it is our recommendation is to assign a commissioner for digital entrepreneurship. So, for example, this commissioner should be or could be responsible for digital policy and be the central point of contact for startup-related policies and programs. So that is the first point. The second one would be, for example, but it's a very, very specific one, to set up a EU-wide startup visa, because we have also experienced that startups need simple procedures to employ the best available talent. And we know that not only in the Czech Republic or in Slovakia, but throughout the European Union, we lack talent. And so Europe needs to become more attractive for founders and skilled workers. And EU-wide startup visa would transform or burdensome and lengthy process into a fast and painless one. So we want to focus on a startup visa, or we want to address this issue to the new European Commission. The next point is to ensure a fair and open internet for all. So net neutrality is definitely the cornerstone of an open and fair digital economy, and it ensures that all internet traffic is treated equally. So net neutrality. Then the next one would be advocate for Europe leading a globally interconnected economy, where startups are global from day one and know they must operate in a global economy. Then it would be investments in digital skills, and we know how really important it is to invest into digital skills, invest into programs to ensure European workers have the skills they need to compete in the global economy, and entrepreneurs have access to the talent they basically need to hire. Then it is also the next point is introduce a startup and scale-up test for all EU legislation. So to ensure startup impact is taken into account by the regulatory scrutiny board when it assesses new EU legislation, including nomination, startup assessor, and providing them with necessary analytical tools. Then it would be definitely strengthen the digital single market, and that has been mentioned already several times, breaking down barriers in trade within the internal market and ensuring no new barriers are implemented. And maybe two last points I'd like to mention is that what is really important is to support and encourage startup research and investments. So identifying and disseminating best-in-class pan-European investment infrastructures, infrastructural or instruments. And the last point I would like to mention is to commit the fighting disinformation, so to leverage only factual sources and help identify champions in the private sector who will work to lessen the impact of disinformation and misinformation online. So this is something that we've prepared together, like 40 organizations, all these points that we are going to address not only to the new European Parliament, but also to the new European Commission.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Let's go back to the podium. Ondřej, seeing your expertise in telco, let me start with a question looking to the past, because last the Commission also came up with an idea to ask large, mostly non-EU online platforms to pay to the European telecom operators a large amount of money because customers of telecom services were using a lot of broadband offered by these service operators to such platforms. So the proposal is internet levy, and the proposal failed after negative feedback in the respective consultation by many relevant stakeholders, some of them from Czech Republic also, including consumer groups, organizations securing the healthy functioning of the internet and others. So could you shed some light on this and maybe mention if we can expect this idea to pop up in the future again?
Yes, and thank you very much for having me. Yes, the internet was saved again, fortunately. That was a very good story. The internet levy was a very, very much misguided idea, which was opposed by everyone except the large telcos in Europe. So everyone except two associations of the large telco companies in Europe, and the European Commission and the European Commissioner, who incidentally was a former CEO of one of those telcos. So everyone except those guys opposed it. Academia, non-profits, consumer organizations, think tanks, even the body of European regulators, which is the Association of European Telco Regulators, they were very much against it. So yeah, so now fortunately this idea that the companies such as Amazon or Netflix or Google or Facebook or this kind of internet companies would pay some sort of or would receive some sort of invoice from the from the telco companies, it was squashed. But in the white paper that was recently published in February about the future of the telecommunications in Europe, it creeped again into this white paper, and it will be destroyed again in the consultation, which ends in June. I invite every one of you to look at the white paper. It's incredibly interesting read about how the Commission actually envisions the future of telecommunications in Europe, and it's very much misguided and addresses precisely the wrong problems that there are with the telco companies in Europe. So to sum it up, it was good that it was destroyed, but the fight is not yet won. We still have a lot to do before us, and it's going to be quite hard because the Commission is really adamant on destroying the vibrant telco market in favor of a few large companies.
Well, same as previous panelists, let me ask you about the future and outlook for the next Commission and Europe's competitiveness, because they said that we need to correct the markets. And I once heard you saying, we do not need European champions, we need champions in Europe. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks. It's very hard to say, like, what should the next Commission do? I would say that if they ask for my advice, which they will not, but if they ask for my advice, I would tell them, please press pause, because there were so many regulations agreed on by the last Commission, by the last Parliament and the Council. So many of them, like DMA, DSA, Digital Governance Act, NIS2 Directive, CER Directive, like all these three-lettered things that we have now, and the people will have to implement here, not only businesses, but also the local regulators, such as the Czech Telecommunication Office here or the Ministry of Industry and Trade. They will have to implement it. They will have to write laws implementing those regulations, and they are overworked right now, literally. And also the businesses, like it's good for me as a consultant, obviously. Like I'm making a lot of money on that, and I will be making a lot of money in the future. But for the businesses and for the government, it's literally horrible, because it was everything at once, and now they are suffering, and they should not. So if the Commission wants to do something good, they should do pretty much nothing except focus on implementation, what they have already done.
It's like any three letters from alphabet are abbreviation for some regulation, right? But we have like 10 minutes to go. We have some space for questions from the audience. So if there are any, raise your hand and you will get mic and you can ask question. But between you would consider a question and maybe get some courage to do that, I will ask our panelists if anyone would like to add something, because many of things were said. So please feel free to react. James?
Maybe I can just add one thing. I'd never heard this framing before of we need champions in Europe, which I think is a great way of thinking about what the challenge of policymakers everywhere is for the next 10, 20 years. We need and want an economy that is highly competitive, that has got the money to invest in green tech and all the things we want as a society. And I would point to a couple of other areas where we need to ensure, and other ways and areas where we need to ensure we're doing this. So one, related to telecoms, we are one of the company that's investing increasingly in satellite broadband. This is not intended to compete with the kind of city center activities you'll get in, services you'll get in Prague or Berlin or Paris or city centers, but it does serve Europe's rural regions, not Europe's, all rural regions and logistics fleets, activities which move around. So we need to embrace new forms of doing the same things, new investments, because that's partly how we drive productivity, and we need to also embrace investments that come from several parts of the world. And that's one of the big changes over the last few years, is that we're all now thinking carefully about where the money comes from, who are our business partners. And I think as a European society, the way we look at this is we have deep cooperations with companies from countries in the OECD, for example, so the United States, Canada, Australia, Japan, and we need to think about the alliances we've got, not just inside Europe, but outside of Europe, and think about who are our trusted allies in economic activity as well as other areas of our life and society. And I think that's one of the ways we need to think about having these champions in Europe from our trusted partners.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I saw Ondřej will react, and then Martin. I can see your hand, so you will react.
One thing perhaps to add, the thing about the single market and its completion is that it's almost impossible. I would suggest everyone to read a paper written by Columbia Law School professor Anu Bradford, who focused on if the digital regulation actually is conducive to innovation. And she found out that it's not about the regulation, it's basically about the size of the market, and the European market, although formally it is a single market, is basically not supporting the scale that you need to scale up as Amazon or Microsoft or Google or Facebook or whatever company you think of, because it is still culturally and language-wise very divergent. You simply cannot. If you are, for example, if you are a video platform such as Netflix, and you serve the market in which the Spanish customers have absolutely different views or absolutely different preferences than the Danish customers or Polish customers. And ultimately, you focus only on one market because you do it well, and ultimately Netflix buys you because it was able to scale up on the US market, which is like 400 million size big. So it's almost impossible to succeed in the same way as the huge Chinese or American platforms did in the past. So let's not focus on this. Let's not try to imitate the success of the YouTubes and Netflixes and Amazons in the past. Let's focus on what's unique in Europe, I guess.
Martin, virtual floor is yours.
Thank you for the floor. I'd like to come back to the sentence that you said, that we need champions in Europe and not European champions. Basically, the question says, or this sentence says, that we need a proper competition framework that allows for growth and productivity. And this is exactly what the Czech Republic and other like-minded member states that are oriented for free trading and using the single market. That's what we argue. Basically, in the discussion, and I'd like to come back to it, there was some criticism of the Commission's basically case law or decision-making practice with regard to mergers and competition law. I can't say about every specific merger, but generally there's now a big discussion whether we should loosen competition law, loosen merger control in order to enable big European companies to grow and to sort of be created, or whether we look at productivity and whether we look at that basically with this merger we do not basically make some detriments to the current level of competition. And basically it's always about fine balance, and I believe that we don't need Commission to create new rules, but we need them to implement the rules that are in place, and especially in competition law, because it also creates the value for consumers.
Okay, thank you. So, looking to the audience, do you have some question, which is a sentence ending with question mark? No questions? Some reactions? If not, let me wrap it up, because there is probably a party in the room behind the door, so we can join after the panel. I would like to close our panel and thank our speakers and everyone in the audience. As stated today, the discussion, the new Commission has to find balance between trying to help and eating impacts of the regulation, because each regulation is a trade-off, and it's better to evaluate ex ante precisely and not to be challenged by the questions about repairing the regulation, because even the signaling of potential or some future regulation could harm the competitiveness of the European Union. In the Czech Republic right now, we are discussing ESOP, we are discussing some creating good conditions for new entrepreneurs who would to substitute the first generation of the Czech entrepreneurs starting in 90s and now ending economic cycle. So we will definitely need competitive institutional environment in the Czech Republic and in the European Union. So let me thank you again offline and online for your participation, and see you at least next year, maybe early. Thank you.
Thank you.